He didn't know that the woman he was about to humiliate wasn't just another loiterer. He didn't know that the oil on her hands came from saving a child trapped under a car just 10 minutes ago. And he certainly didn't know that the deed to this entire multi-million-dollar mall was tucked inside her greasy pocket. The manager's polished shoe stepped over a puddle of motor oil as he blocked her path. His lip curled in disgust. The woman in front of him wore a tattered jumpsuit stained with soot and grease. Her gray hair was tied back with a rubber band. She looked like she'd crawled out from under an engine block. What he couldn't see was the folded document in her inside pocket. The one that read, Beatrix Chun, majority stakeholder, Silver Lake Properties, LLC. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to where this all started. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here or yet to join us, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Beatrix pushed through the glass doors of the Gilded Gallery at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. The air conditioning hit her face like a cold slap. She'd been outside in the Florida heat for 3 hours, lying on her back under a broken-down Chevy, helping a young mother whose car had died in the mall parking lot. The woman had a screaming toddler in the back seat and no money for a tow truck. Beatrix had tools in her truck. She always did. Old habits from her construction days in Texas never died. Now, she just wanted to buy a birthday gift for her grandson. Something nice. Maybe one of those silk scarves she'd seen advertised. The store smelled like expensive perfume and new leather. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Everything was white marble and gold trim. Beatrix's work boots squeaked on the polished floor. She made her way to a display table near the window. A beautiful navy blue scarf caught her eye. She reached out to touch the fabric. Don't. The voice was sharp. Cold. Beatrix looked up. A man in a tailored charcoal suit stood 3 feet away. His name tag read Sloan, store manager. He was maybe 40, with slick back hair and a watch that probably cost more than most people's cars. Excuse me, Beatrix said. Sloane's eyes traveled from her oil-stained hands to her dirty jumpsuit to her scuffed boots. His nose wrinkled like he'd smelled something rotten. You're getting grease on my merchandise, he said. Beatrix pulled her hand back. I wasn't touching it yet. I was just looking. Looking requires eyes, not hands, Sloane said. And frankly, I'm not sure you're in the right place. A well-dressed woman in her 50s paused near the handbag display. She was watching now. So was the teenage girl working the register. Beatrix kept her voice calm. I have money. I want to buy a gift. Sloane laughed. It wasn't a friendly sound. Do you know where you are? This isn't a thrift store. That scarf costs $1,200. I know what it costs, Beatrix said quietly. Then you know you can't afford it. Sloane crossed his arms. People like you are the reason high-end retail is dying. You come in here, touch everything, and leave without buying anything. You belong in a junkyard, not my gallery. The woman by the handbags gasped. Another shopper, a man in a polo shirt, stopped to watch. Within seconds, 5 people had gathered. Phones came out. This was going to be a show. Beatrix felt the heat rise in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. She'd dealt with men like Sloane before. Men who thought money bought them permission to treat others like garbage. I'd like to speak to your manager, she said. Sloane smiled. I am the manager, and I'm asking you to leave before I call security. For what? Standing in your store? For loitering while poor. Sloane pulled out his phone. I'm giving you 10 seconds. Beatrix reached into her jumpsuit pocket. She needed her phone. She needed to document this. Her fingers brushed against the folded property deed, but she pulled out her cell phone instead. Sloane's eyes went wide. She has a weapon. It's a phone, Beatrix said, holding it up. But Sloane had already hit a button on his tablet. An alarm buzzed. Security to the Gilded Gallery. Immediately, the crowd stepped back. A mother pulled her daughter closer. The man in the polo shirt had his phone up, recording everything. Beatrix stood perfectly still. She could feel her heart pounding, but she kept her hands visible. She knew how these things could go wrong, especially for a woman who looked like her right now. The security guard appeared within 30 seconds. His name tag read Caleb. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with broad shoulders and cautious eyes. "What's the situation?" Caleb asked. "This vagrant threatened me," Sloan said. "I want her removed from the property." Caleb looked at Beatrix. Then he looked at her hands. His eyes stopped on her right hand. On the ring. It was small, tarnished silver with a deep blue stone. Nothing fancy, but Caleb's face went pale. His hand, which had been reaching for his radio, began to tremble. Caleb stared at the ring on Beatrix's finger like he'd seen a ghost. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "Are you?" "She's leaving," Sloan interrupted. "Now, or I'm calling the real police." Caleb didn't move. He was still looking at Beatrix's hand. The ring wasn't worth more than $100. It was a simple signet ring with a blue sapphire, the kind you could buy at any jewelry store. But something about it had frozen this young security guard in his tracks. "Caleb," Sloan snapped. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you," Caleb said. But he didn't reach for Beatrix. Instead, he took a step back and lowered his radio. "What are you doing?" Sloan's voice rose. "Arrest her." "For what?" Caleb asked. "For trespassing. For threatening me." Beatrix hadn't moved. She stood with her phone in one hand and her other hand relaxed at her side. The crowd was getting larger now. At least a dozen people had gathered, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Caleb looked at Sloan. "Sir, she hasn't broken any laws. She's filthy. She's scaring my customers." "Being dirty isn't a crime," Caleb said. Sloan's face turned red. "Then you're fired. As of this moment, you no longer work for this mall." "You can't fire me," Caleb said quietly. "You're a store manager. I work for mall security. Different chain of command." Sloan pulled out his phone. "Fine. I'm calling your supervisor. We'll see how long you keep that job after I explain how you refuse to protect me from a vagrant." Beatrix finally spoke. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Sloan, if I leave right now, will you treat the next person who walks in here better?" Sloan turned to her. "What?" "The next person who doesn't look like your other customers. The next person in work clothes or cheap shoes. Will you treat them with respect?" Sloan's laugh was bitter. "There won't be a next time. I'm scrubbing your scent off the floor the moment you're gone. This is a luxury establishment, not a homeless shelter." One of the watching shoppers, an older man with a veteran's cap, shook his head in disgust. "That's enough, son," he said to Sloan. "She's done nothing wrong." "Stay out of this," Sloan hissed. Beatrix looked at Caleb. The young guard's eyes met hers. There was something there. Recognition. Maybe even respect. "I'm sorry," Caleb whispered. "I'm so sorry." Sloan heard it. "Sorry? Sorry for what?" Before anyone could answer, Sloan's tablet chimed. He glanced down at the screen. His expression changed. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something else. Panic. "What is it?" the teenage cashier asked. Sloan didn't answer. He was staring at the notification on his screen. His thumb scrolled frantically. Beatrix watched him. She knew what that message said. She'd sent the order herself 3 days ago. "The silent owner is coming," Sloan muttered. "The owner is coming." The cashier leaned in. "The owner? I thought the owner lived in Hawaii or something." "He does. Or she does. Nobody knows." Sloan looked up, his eyes darting around the store like he was searching for hidden cameras. "It says here there's a surprise inspection. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That meant 3:17 p.m. Beatrix glanced at the mall's central clock. It was 2:47 p.m. She looked at Sloan and said, 30 minutes? That's plenty of time for a lesson. Sloane's head snapped toward her. What did you say? I said 30 minutes is enough time. Enough time for what? Beatrix didn't answer. She just smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something you didn't. The smile of someone who'd been underestimated their entire life and had learned to weaponize patience. Sloane stared at her. For the first time since this encounter began, doubt flickered across his face. She's standing her ground alone. Only 1% of people would stay to help her. Are you part of the brave 1%, or would you walk away? Subscribe if you believe in standing up for the truth. To understand why Beatrix was standing in that mall, covered in grease and facing down a man who thought he was untouchable, you need to go back 20 years. Back to a small town outside Houston, Texas. Beatrix wasn't always Beatrix Chun, owner of commercial real estate across 3 states. She was born Beatrix Martinez, daughter of a mechanic and a seamstress. She grew up in a house where dinner meant rice and beans 4 nights a week, and new clothes came once a year, if you were lucky. She met Robert Chun when she was 23. He was a construction foreman with rough hands and a quiet smile. They got married in a courthouse on a Tuesday because they couldn't afford a Saturday wedding. Their honeymoon was a weekend camping trip in Big Bend. Robert had a dream. He wanted to start his own construction company. Not a big one, just enough to feed a family and treat workers with dignity. Beatrix believed in him. She worked 2 jobs, saved every penny, and after 5 years, they scraped together enough for a down payment on their first project, a small community center in a low-income neighborhood. The bank said no. The investors laughed. But they built it anyway. They poured the concrete themselves. Beatrix learned to read blueprints. Robert worked 18-hour days. When it was finished, that community center became the heart of the neighborhood. Churches held services there. Kids learned to play basketball there. Families had birthday parties there. Word spread. More projects came. Bigger projects. Within 10 years, Chin Construction was building schools and libraries across Texas. They never forgot where they came from. They paid their workers well. They hired people with criminal records, people others wouldn't touch. They treated everyone with respect. Then, 15 years ago, Robert collapsed on a job site. A heart attack. He was 52 years old. Beatrix held his hand in the hospital. The doctors said he had maybe a few months. Robert made her promise something. Never forget the dirt we came from, he said. The day you're too good to get your hands dirty is the day you've lost your soul. He died 3 weeks later. Beatrix buried him in the suit he'd worn to their courthouse wedding. Then she went back to work. She expanded the company. She diversified. Construction led to property development. Property development led to commercial real estate. She started buying shopping centers, office buildings, and eventually, entire malls. But she never stopped wearing the jumpsuit. Every month, Beatrix would pick one of her properties and show up unannounced, dressed like a worker. She'd pose as a janitor, a delivery driver, or, like today, a mechanic. She wanted to see how her managers treated the people they thought didn't matter, the people they thought couldn't fight back. She called it the humanity score. Most of her managers passed. They treated everyone with kindness, or at least basic decency. Those managers got bonuses and promotions. The ones who failed, they got fired. Today, she'd driven her beat-up Chevy pickup truck to the Silver Lake Mall in Florida. She owned 51% of it through a holding company. She also owned malls in Washington and Colorado. Combined, her real estate portfolio was worth over $200 million. But to Sloane, she was just a dirty woman who smelled like poverty. Beatrix had been planning to visit the Gilded Gallery anyway. Then, in the parking lot, she'd seen a young mother crying next to a broken-down car. The woman had no money and a screaming child. Beatrix couldn't just walk past. She'd spent 3 hours fixing that car. got covered in grease. The mother tried to pay her, but Beatrix refused. "Just help someone else when you can," she'd said. Now, standing in Sloane's store, Beatrix noticed something. Near the back wall, there was a closed door with a handwritten sign. "Private office. Authorized personnel only." That was odd. Beatrix knew the floor plan of every store in this mall. That office wasn't on the blueprints. Then she saw it. In the window of that unauthorized office, a small for sale sign. The kind realtors use for luxury goods. Sloane wasn't just running a retail store. He was running a side business. Inside her mall, without a lease. Beatrix's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. Sloane's fingers moved fast across his phone screen. He'd stepped away from the crowd, closer to the back of the store, but Beatrix could still hear him. "Vance," Sloane hissed into the phone. "I need you here. Now." There was a pause. Beatrix couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she could see Sloane's body language. He was tense, desperate. "I don't care if you're in a meeting," Sloane said. "There's a problem. A big one. The owner's coming in 30 minutes, and there's some lunatic in my store causing a scene." Another pause. "No, I can't handle it myself. Just get down here." Sloane hung up. He turned back to Beatrix, and his expression had changed. The panic was still there, but now there was something else. A cold calculation. "You're still here," he said. "I haven't broken any laws," Beatrix replied. "We'll see about that." The crowd was still watching. Phones were still recording. Caleb, the security guard, stood off to the side, his hand hovering near his radio but not touching it. He kept glancing at Beatrix's ring. 5 minutes later, a man in an expensive navy suit pushed through the crowd. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with silver hair and the kind of confident stride that came from never being told no. His name tag read, Vance Holloway, General Manager. "What's going on here?" Vance demanded. Sloane pointed at Beatrix. "This woman is disrupting my store. She's harassing customers and refusing to leave." Vance looked at Beatrix. His eyes did the same scan Sloane's had done earlier. The jumpsuit, the grease, the worn boots. His lip curled slightly. "Ma'am," Vance said, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." "I'm shopping," Beatrix said. "You're loitering. I haven't been here more than 10 minutes. 10 minutes is enough," Vance said. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Beatrix, Sloane, and Caleb could hear. "Listen, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to go. We have an important inspection coming, and we can't have people like you in the store when the owner arrives." "People like me?" Beatrix asked. Vance's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know what I mean." Beatrix did know, and it made her blood boil, but she kept her face calm. "I understand." Vance looked relieved. "Good. Then. But I'd like to file a complaint first," Beatrix continued, "about the unauthorized office in the back of this store." Sloane's face went white. Vance's smile disappeared. "What unauthorized office?" Beatrix pointed to the door with the private sign. "That one. It's not on the store's lease agreement. And unless I'm mistaken, there's merchandise being sold out of it that isn't part of the Gilded Gallery's inventory." "That's none of your business," Sloane snapped. "Actually," Beatrix said, "it is." Before anyone could respond, Vance pulled something from his pocket. "Handcuffs. Actual metal handcuffs." "You know what?" Vance said. "I've changed my mind. You're not just loitering. You're trespassing. And I think you might be a thief." "A thief?" Beatrix's voice stayed level, but her heart rate spiked. This was escalating faster than she'd expected. "Sloane," Vance said, "check her pockets." "What?" "No, you can't." But Sloane was already moving. He reached toward Beatrix's jumpsuit pocket. "Don't touch me," Beatrix said firmly. Sloane hesitated. Then Vance nodded at him. "Do it." Sloane's hand dipped into Beatrix's front pocket. She could have stopped him, could have pushed him away, but she wanted to see how far they'd go. Sloane pulled out something. A watch. Expensive. Gold with a leather band. Well, Vance said. Where did you get this? Beatrix stared at the watch. She'd never seen it before in her life. That's not mine, she said. Of course it's not, Vance replied. You stole it. I didn't steal anything. Then how did it get in your pocket? Beatrix looked at Sloane. He wouldn't meet her eyes. They'd planted it. Of course they had. Vance, Beatrix said slowly. You've forgotten who signs your bonus checks. Vance laughed. Actually laughed. My bonus checks are signed by a corporation in Hawaii. I've never even met the owner. For all I know, the owner's a computer program. He pulled out the handcuffs. But I know you're a thief. Let's see how the owner feels about that. Pause. Don't judge yet. If you were Beatrix, would you reveal your identity now? Or let them arrest you to see how far they'll go? Comment A for reveal or B for wait. The handcuffs clicked around Beatrix's wrists. Cold metal. Tight enough to remind her they were there, but not tight enough to hurt. Vance knew what he was doing. He'd done this before. The crowd gasped. The man in the veteran's cap stepped forward. This is wrong, he said. She didn't do anything. Sir, step back, Vance ordered. Or you'll be next. The veteran hesitated, then stepped back. But he kept his phone up, recording everything. Beatrix didn't resist. She let Vance take her arm. She let him lead her through the store, past the displays of silk scarves and leather handbags, past the shocked faces of shoppers who'd come for luxury and found a spectacle instead. Sloane followed close behind, his face a mixture of relief and something else. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Beatrix couldn't tell. Caleb walked on her other side. The young security guard's jaw was clenched. His eyes kept darting to the handcuffs, then to Beatrix's face, then back to the handcuffs. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. They walked through the mall's main corridor. People stopped to stare. A woman pulled her child closer. A teenager snapped a photo. An elderly couple whispered to each other. Beatrix kept her head up. She'd been humiliated before. She'd survived worse than this. Where are you taking me? She asked. The security office, Vance said. We're going to hold you there until the police arrive. The police, Beatrix repeated. For a watch I didn't steal. That's for them to decide. They were almost at the mall's east exit when Beatrix saw them. Through the glass doors, a sleek black motorcade pulling up to the main entrance. 3 vehicles, 2 SUVs and a sedan, all black, all polished to a mirror shine. Vance saw them too. He stopped walking. Who's that? Sloane asked. I don't know, Vance muttered. But his voice had lost its confidence. The mall's main doors opened. The crowd parted instinctively. A man in a dark suit stepped through first. He scanned the area, his hand near his jacket in the universal stance of private security. Then came 2 more people. A woman with a clipboard and a man with steel gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Vance's grip on Beatrix's arm loosened. That's the regional inspection team, Sloane whispered. They're early. They're not supposed to be here for 20 more minutes, Vance said. Beatrix could have told them why they were early. She'd moved up the inspection time herself 2 hours ago, right before she'd fixed that mother's car in the parking lot. She'd wanted to see how Sloane operated under pressure. She'd gotten more than she bargained for. We need to hide her, Sloane hissed. If they see a woman in handcuffs. Too late, Vance said. The inspection team was walking toward them. The man with gray hair was in the lead. His eyes locked onto Beatrix. Sloane tried to steer her behind a pillar. Move, he whispered. Get behind. Beatrix didn't move. Instead, she shifted her weight and let her metal toolbox, which had been slung over her shoulder, slip. It hit the marble floor with a crash that echoed through the entire mall. Tools scattered. A wrench spun across the floor. A hammer clanked against a trash can. Everyone turned to look. The man with gray hair stopped. His eyes went from the scattered tools to Beatrix's handcuffed wrists to her oil-stained jumpsuit. Then he looked at her face, and he froze. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the man with gray hair walked forward. He didn't look at Vance. He didn't look at Sloane. He looked only at Beatrix. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. His eyes dropped to the handcuffs, then to the ring on her finger, the small, tarnished signet ring with the blue sapphire. His face went pale. He bowed his head. "The board is waiting for your signal, ma'am." Most people would have given up by now, but Beatrix knows that justice is coming. If you're not subscribing, you're missing the moment Sloane's world falls apart. Don't be the one left in the dark. The mall went silent. Vance's hand was still gripping Beatrix's arm. Sloane stood frozen, his mouth half open, his brain trying to process what he'd just heard. The man with gray hair, his name tag read Julian Cross, Regional Operations Director, was still bowing his head toward the handcuffed woman in the greasy jumpsuit. "Ma'am," Julian said quietly, "we came as soon as you moved up the inspection time." Vance's fingers released Beatrix's arm like she'd suddenly caught fire. He stepped back, his face draining of color. What are you talking about?" Sloane stammered. Julian straightened. He looked at Sloane the way you might look at a cockroach you'd found in your kitchen. Then he turned to Vance. "Remove the handcuffs." "Now." Vance fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking so badly it took him 3 tries to get the key into the lock. The handcuffs clicked open and fell away from Beatrix's wrists. She rubbed her wrists slowly, taking her time. The red marks from the metal were already visible on her skin. "Thank you, Julian," Beatrix said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath it. Julian nodded. "The board is assembled in the conference room. They're ready when you are." "In a moment," Beatrix said. She turned to look at the crowd that had gathered. 50 people, maybe more. All watching. All recording. Then she looked at Vance. "Vance, you told me the owner lived in Hawaii," Beatrix said. "That the owner was probably a computer program. It seems you didn't check the New Jersey or Florida registrations very carefully." Vance opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You're the..." "I'm the owner," Beatrix said simply. "Well, the majority stakeholder. 51%. I've owned this mall for 12 years. Sloane made a sound. It might have been a laugh or a sob. It was hard to tell. The woman with the clipboard stepped forward. She was maybe 30, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she didn't tolerate nonsense. "Ms. Chun," she said, "I have the documentation you requested. The lease agreements, the inventory reports, and the surveillance footage from the past 6 months." "Thank you, Patricia," Beatrix said. She reached into her jumpsuit. Not the pocket where the planted watch had been. A different pocket. An inside pocket with a zipper. She pulled out a small black device. It looked like a button, the kind you'd find on a coat, but it had a tiny lens in the center. "I've been recording since I walked into the Gilded Gallery," Beatrix said. She held up the button camera. "Everything. The insults. The threats. The planted evidence. All of it." Vance's knees buckled. He caught himself on a nearby bench. Sloane's face had gone from white to gray. "You can't. This is entrapment. This is illegal." "Actually," Patricia said, pulling out a tablet, "Florida is a 2-party consent state for private conversations. But Ms. Chun was in a public retail space where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. The recording is completely legal." Beatrix looked at Sloane. "You call me a vagrant. You said I smelled like poverty. You said I belonged in a junkyard. I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did," Beatrix interrupted. "You meant every word. Because you thought I couldn't fight back. You thought I was powerless." She turned to address the crowd. Her voice carried across the mall's corridor. How many of you have been treated this way? She asked. How many of you have walked into a store and been followed because of how you look? Or ignored because you weren't dressed right? Or made to feel small because someone decided you weren't worth their time? Hands went up. Not all of them, but enough. The woman with her daughter raised her hand. The veteran in the cap raised his. A teenage boy in a fast food uniform raised his. That ends today, Beatrix said. In this mall. In all my properties. It ends today. She turned back to Sloane and Vance. Now, she said, let's talk about what's actually inside those designer boxes in the back room. Sloane went pale again. Vance looked like he might throw up. Julian stepped forward. Lead the way, Ms. Chun. Beatrix led them through the gilded gallery's main floor, past the silk scarves and leather goods, toward the back of the store. The crowd followed, pressing in behind them like witnesses to a trial. Sloane tried to block the door to the stockroom. You can't go back there. That's employee only. I own the building, Beatrix said. Move. Sloane didn't move. Julian did it for him, gently but firmly guiding the manager aside. The stockroom was exactly what you'd expect. Metal shelves stacked with inventory boxes. A small desk with a computer. A time clock on the wall. Everything looked normal. I don't see any problem here, Vance said. His voice had a desperate edge to it. Beatrix walked past the main shelving units. She counted the rows as she walked. 1, 2, 3. At the fourth row, she stopped. Patricia, do you have the original floor plans? Patricia pulled up a blueprint on her tablet. Right here. Beatrix compared the room to the blueprint. According to this, the stockroom should be 30 feet deep. But if you look at the back wall, it's only 25 feet from the door. Julian measured it with his eyes. She's right. Where are the other 5 feet? Beatrix walked to the back wall. It looked solid. White painted drywall, just like the rest of the room. But at the corner, near the floor, there was a small gap. A seam that shouldn't be there. She pressed on the wall. It shifted slightly. It's a false wall, she said. Sloane lunged forward. Don't touch that. But Caleb was faster. The young security guard grabbed Sloane's arm and held him back. Beatrix found the latch. It was hidden behind a loose electrical outlet cover. She pulled it, and the entire wall section swung open on hidden hinges. Behind it was a small room, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, and it was packed with boxes. Designer boxes. Luxury brand boxes. The kind that should have been on the showroom floor, not hidden behind a fake wall. Julian stepped into the hidden room. He pulled out his phone's flashlight. The beam played across the stacked boxes. Open one, Beatrix said. Patricia pulled a box from the middle of the stack. It was labeled as a designer handbag. Retail price for $1,000. She opened it. Inside was a handbag. It looked expensive. The stitching was clean. The leather looked real. The brand logo was prominent. Patricia turned it over. On the inside, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a small tag. It read, Made in Vietnam. Wholesale cost, $47. That's a counterfeit, Julian said flatly. No, Sloane said. No, that's just a shipping error. Sometimes the suppliers mix up the inventory. It happens all the time. Beatrix reached into another box. Same thing. Designer label. Cheap knockoff inside. She opened 5 more boxes. All counterfeits. These aren't shipping errors, Beatrix said. These are deliberate. You've been selling fake merchandise at real prices and pocketing the difference. Patricia was already on her tablet, pulling up records. I have the invoices here. The ones filed with corporate show purchases from the authorized distributors. But look at this. She swiped to another screen. These are the actual credit card receipts from Sloane's personal accounts. He's been buying knockoffs from overseas suppliers for a fraction of the cost. Those are fake, Sloane said. His voice was rising, cracking. Someone's framing me. Your signature is on every invoice, Patricia said. She turned the tablet around. There it was. Sloane's signature. Dozens of times. Authorizing payments to companies in China, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Julian pulled out his phone. I'm calling the state police. You can't do this. Sloane shouted. I made this store famous. I brought in more revenue than any other manager in the region. By selling counterfeit goods, Beatrix said quietly. By lying to customers. By stealing. Sloane's face twisted. He tried to grab the invoices from Patricia's hands. Caleb moved faster. He caught Sloane's wrist and twisted it behind his back in one smooth motion. Don't, Caleb said. Outside, in the distance, sirens began to wail. Sloane went limp. This is your fault, he said to Beatrix. If you'd just left when I told you to, none of this would have happened. Beatrix looked at him, really looked at him. She saw a man who'd probably started with small compromises. A little lie here, a small theft there. And over time, those small choices had built into something monstrous. No, she said. This happened because you thought you were above consequences. You thought nobody was watching. The sirens got louder. Sloane thought he was too smart to get caught. Most people think they can hide the truth forever. Subscribe now so you're always on the side of justice before the sirens start for you. The state police arrived in 3 cars. Blue and red lights strobed across the mall's white walls. Shoppers pressed against the windows to watch. 2 officers entered the stockroom. They looked at the boxes, at the invoices, at Sloane, who was still being held by Caleb. Who's filing the complaint? The lead officer asked. I am, Beatrix said. The officer looked at her jumpsuit, at the grease stains. His expression didn't change. And you are? Beatrix Chun. I own this mall. The officer pulled out a notepad. Can you prove that? Patricia handed him a folder. Inside were property deeds, incorporation documents, and a letter from the mall's legal team confirming Beatrix's identity. The officer read through them. His eyebrows went up. He looked at Beatrix again, this time with more respect. Ma'am, he said, we'll need a full statement. You'll have it, Beatrix said. But first, I need to handle some internal business. She turned to Vance. The general manager was standing against the wall, looking like he wanted to disappear into it. Vance, Beatrix said, how long have you worked for Silver Lake Properties? 8 years, Vance said quietly. And in those 8 years, how many times have you met with ownership? Vance swallowed hard. Never. All our communication was through corporate. Did you ever wonder why? I assumed you were busy. I was testing you, Beatrix said. Every manager in my company gets tested. I visit their properties unannounced. Sometimes I'm a customer. Sometimes I'm a delivery driver. Once, I spent a week as a janitor in one of my office buildings. Vance's face went slack. You've done this before? Dozens of times. Most of my managers pass. They treat everyone with decency. They run honest operations. Beatrix stepped closer. You failed, Vance. Spectacularly. I didn't know about the counterfeits, Vance said quickly. That was all Sloane. I swear. But you did plant evidence on me, Beatrix said. You handcuffed me without cause. You were ready to have me arrested to save your own skin. Vance opened his mouth, closed it. He had no defense. Beatrix pulled out her phone. She opened an app and typed quickly. I'm sending a termination notice to HR right now. You're fired, Vance. Effective immediately. You can't. I can. Check your employment contract. Section 12, Paragraph 4. Moral turpitude clause. Any employee who engages in behavior that damages the company's reputation or violates basic ethical standards can be terminated without severance. Patricia was already nodding. The clause also forfeits all pension benefits and performance bonuses. Vance's face went from pale to red. That's not fair. I have a family. I have bills. So did the woman whose car I fixed in the parking lot, Beatrix said. So do the employees you've been underpaying while you collected six-figure bonuses. Fair is a funny word, Vance. It means different things depending on where you're standing. The police moved towards Sloan. They read him his rights as they cuffed him. The same handcuffs he'd wanted to use on Beatrix. As they led him past her, Sloan stopped. "I hope you're happy," he spat. Beatrix didn't flinch. "I'm not happy. I'm disappointed. You had a good job. You could have built something meaningful. Instead, you chose greed." Sloan was led away. The crowd parted to let the police through. Some people clapped. Others just stared. The wealthy shoppers who'd watched Beatrix being humiliated earlier now approached her. The woman in the designer dress. The man in the polo shirt. "We're so sorry," the woman said. "We should have said something." Beatrix looked at her. "Should you have? Or are you just sorry now that you know who I am?" The woman's smile faltered. She backed away. Beatrix turned to Caleb. The young security guard was standing at attention, looking nervous. "Caleb," Beatrix said, "how long have you been reporting Sloan's activities to corporate?" "For months, ma'am." "Why didn't you come to me directly?" "I didn't know how to reach you, and I wasn't sure anyone would believe me." Beatrix nodded. "You did the right thing. And you protected me today, even when you weren't sure what was happening." She paused. "How would you like a promotion?" Caleb's eyes went wide. "Ma'am, head of mall security. Full benefits. A 30% raise. You start Monday." Caleb looked like he might cry. Thank you. Thank you so much." Julian stepped forward. He'd been quiet through most of this, but now he cleared his throat. "Ms. Chun," he said, "I need to tell you something." "Go ahead." "Earlier today, my father called me. He said an angel had fixed his tractor. He'd broken down on the side of the road, and a woman in a jumpsuit stopped to help him." Julian's voice caught. He's a veteran, 73 years old. Proud. He wouldn't usually accept help, but he said this woman wouldn't take no for an answer. Beatrix smiled. "Is his name Frank?" "Yes, ma'am. He's a good man. Told me stories about Korea while I worked on his engine." Julian shook his head in wonder. "My father told me an angel fixed his tractor today. I didn't realize that angel owned my company." 30 minutes later, Beatrix stood in the mall's central courtyard. Word had spread fast. Employees from every store had gathered. Custodians, cashiers, stock clerks, security guards. Even some of the shoppers had stayed. Someone had brought out a maintenance ladder so Beatrix could stand higher. She didn't want it at first, but Julian insisted. "They need to see you," he said. So Beatrix climbed 3 rungs up and turned to face the crowd. There were maybe 200 people now, some holding phones, some just watching with curious, cautious eyes. "My name is Beatrix Chun," she said. Her voice carried across the courtyard. "I own this mall. I also own 2 other malls, one in Washington and one in Colorado. And I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you." The crowd was silent. "I grew up poor. My father was a mechanic. My mother sewed clothes for neighbors to earn extra money. We lived in a house where the air conditioning only worked in one room, and we ate rice and beans 4 nights a week." Beatrix paused. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something." She looked across the faces in front of her. Young people, old people, every shade of skin, every kind of background. "Wealth isn't a suit," she said. "It's not a car or a watch or a fancy address. Real wealth is how you treat the person who can do nothing for you. It's how you act when you think nobody's watching." A few people nodded. 20 years ago, my husband and I built our first construction project. It was a community center in a neighborhood where most people had given up hope. The banks wouldn't loan us money. The investors laughed at us. But we built it anyway. Beatrix's voice grew stronger. "And you know what? That community center is still standing. Kids learned to read there. Families celebrated birthdays there. It mattered." She thought about Robert, about his calloused hands and quiet smile. about the promise she'd made to him in that hospital bed. My husband died 15 years ago. Before he passed, he made me promise something. He said, "Never forget the dirt we came from. The day you're too good to get your hands dirty is the day you've lost your soul." Beatrix held up her oil-stained hands. "I wear this jumpsuit because I refuse to forget. Every month, I visit one of my properties dressed like a worker. Not because I don't trust my employees, but because I need to see how people are really being treated, how the janitors are spoken to, how the delivery drivers are respected, how someone who looks poor is welcomed or rejected." A woman in the crowd, one of the custodians, wiped her eyes. "Today, I failed a manager and a general manager," Beatrix continued. "And they're gone now. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not looking to punish people. I'm looking to build something better." She gestured to the mall around them. "Starting tomorrow, this mall will operate under a new policy. We're calling it Service First. It means every customer, regardless of how they look or how much money they have, gets treated with dignity. Every employee, from the CEO to the person who empties the trash, gets treated with respect." There was applause, scattered at first, then growing. "I also want to announce something else," Beatrix said. "We're converting the former Gilded Gallery space into a small business incubator. Local entrepreneurs who can't afford commercial rent will be able to use it for free for their first year. We'll provide mentorship, business training, and support." The applause got louder. A small voice cut through the noise. "Are you a queen?" Beatrix looked down. A boy, maybe 6 years old, was standing near the ladder. His mother had her hand on his shoulder. Beatrix climbed down from the ladder. She knelt so she was eye level with the boy. "No, honey," she said gently. "I'm just a woman who knows the value of a hard day's work." The boy considered this. "But you're rich." "Yes." "And you still fix cars?" "Yes." "Why?" Beatrix smiled. "Because being rich doesn't mean you stop being useful. Money can buy you a mall, but it can't buy you the respect of a janitor. And without that, you are truly bankrupt." The boy nodded solemnly, like this made perfect sense. "Be honest. Was this justice served, or was Beatrix too harsh on Sloane? Comment justice if you agree with her, or harsh if you think she went too far. I'm pinning the most thoughtful take." 6 months later, the Silver Lake Mall looked different. Not in structure, but in spirit. Where the Gilded Gallery had once stood, there was now a bright, open space called the Launch Pad. Inside, 5 small businesses were operating. A bakery run by a single mother, a custom jewelry shop owned by a former foster kid, a bookstore specializing in diverse authors, a tech repair service, and a small coffee roaster. All of them were thriving. Caleb walked through the mall in his new uniform. Head of Security was embroidered on his jacket. He'd hired 3 new guards, all of them trained in de-escalation and customer service. Complaints about security harassment had dropped to 0. Julian had been promoted to VP of Operations. He'd implemented Beatrix's service-first policy across all 3 of her malls. Employee satisfaction scores had gone up 40%. Customer reviews were glowing. Even Vance had sent a letter. It arrived at corporate headquarters 3 months after his termination. In it, he apologized. He admitted he'd been greedy, arrogant, and cruel. He said he was working as a sales associate at a furniture store now, making $12 an hour, and it had taught him more about humility than his entire previous career. Beatrix had read the letter twice. Then she'd filed it away. Some people learned. Some didn't. But everyone deserved the chance. Today, Beatrix was 400 miles away in New Jersey. She stood outside a half-finished building in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The sign out front read, "Hope House, opening fall 2026. It was the orphanage project, the one she'd been working on for 3 years. The one that had made her late to the mall that day in Florida. She wore the same greasy jumpsuit, the same work boots. She'd spent the morning helping install windows on the second floor. A camera crew from a local news station had shown up, wanting to do a story about this secret millionaire who poses as a mechanic. Beatrix had declined. She didn't do this for attention, but she did let them film the building. Let them talk to the construction workers, the future staff members, the community leaders who'd been waiting for something like this for decades. As the crew packed up, one of the workers approached Beatrix. His name was Marcus. He was 19, fresh out of foster care, and Beatrix had hired him despite his lack of experience. "Ms. Chun," Marcus said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you do this? You're rich. You could be anywhere, doing anything. Why work construction? Why get dirty?" Beatrix looked at the building, at the windows that would soon light up with children's laughter, at the walls that would hold families back together. "Because someone did it for me," she said. "When I was young and poor and nobody believed in me, someone gave me a chance. Someone saw past the dirt and the cheap clothes and the accent. They saw a person." She turned to Marcus. "The next time you see someone who looks like they smell of poverty, I want you to remember something. You might be looking at the person who owns the ground you're walking on." She paused. "Or better yet, you're looking at a human being. And that should be enough." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." Beatrix picked up her toolbox. It was the same one she'd carried into the mall 6 months ago. The same one she'd dropped to get Julian's attention. She walked to her truck, the beat-up Chevy that had more rust than paint, and threw the toolbox in the back. Before she drove away, she looked at the orphanage one more time. In a few months, it would be full of kids. Kids who needed someone to believe in them. Kids who needed to know that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. She thought about Robert, about the promise she'd made, about the dirt they'd come from and the empire they'd built. She'd kept her promise. She'd never forgotten, and she never would. If this story touched your heart even a little, hit that like button. We've all felt judged before. Tell us your story in the comments. Have you ever been treated differently because of how you looked? How did it make you feel? And if you're still not subscribing, what's holding you back? Don't let the next great lesson pass you by. Stories like Beatrix's remind us that character isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in how we treat each other when nobody's watching. Subscribe now and join a community that believes in standing up for what's right.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And guess what? The story doesn't end here. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into another fascinating story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for being a part of this amazing community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move you.